Good day, everyone. Welcome to one of our bite-sized videos, of which the purpose is to bring you, the integrator, up to speed with some of the basic concepts surrounding the Flowgear integration experience, as well as take a brief dive into one of our popular use cases. We're going to start by exploring the screen in front of you, the Flowgear console, which is the very first thing you'll be greeted with after logging into Flowgear. The Flowgear console provides access to all the components relevant to your integrations. From here, you can navigate to spaces that facilitate the setup for different parts of the integration. The three primary spaces that I'd like to briefly touch on are the workflows, connections, and drop points. Workflows can be found by navigating to the workflow section over here. And workflows provide a canvas from which you can drag and drop connectors and tooling provided by the Flowgear platform and construct your integration according to your business rules. We will go more in depth around workflows once we start to explore the specific use case. Connections, which we can navigate to by clicking over here, are spaces with which you can provide credentials that allow you to authenticate and connect to the systems which you would like to integrate with. We can go ahead and click on the new button over here, and we can go ahead and select a particular connector to work with, and choosing any one of the connectors we can see here within the connector section, such as Connect, Rise, Manage. You'll see there's a space in which you can plug in credentials that are relevant to that specific platform. You then have the option of providing credentials for different profiles, such as test and production, and you will be able to run your workflow or integration within that profile, which will then target that specific environment that you've set up. If you set up your credentials correctly, you can click on the play button over here, which, if successful, will give you a green banner telling you that the test succeeded. Finally, we have the drop point section. The idea behind the drop points is that it is our solution to hybrid on-prem and cloud integrations. You can install the drop point agent onto your on-prem servers, which will allow us then to talk to those servers within the scope of what you allow us to do using the whitelisting features. This means that we can talk to your file systems, we can talk to your AD, or we can move data between CRMs and ERPs that are not exposed to the internet with the drop point. These three spaces are the most important aspects related to the integrations themselves within Flowgear. For a deeper dive into the elements that make up the Flowgear console, please see our bite-sized video focusing on navigating the Flowgear console. Next, we're going to take a deeper dive into workflows and nodes. To do this, we're going to navigate to the workflow section, which we have done by clicking on this workflow over here. And from there, we're going to open up a new workflow by clicking on the new button right over here, at which point we're given the option to name the workflow, which we can name it appropriately, and click on the OK button over here. At which point you are then greeted with the Flowgear design canvas, the purpose of which is to provide you with the space to drag and drop Flowgear tooling in a specific sequence and order to string it together and then form the basis of an integration from end to end. Now, to start dropping the tooling onto the canvas, we're going to click this plus icon over here, which is going to open up a list of our nodes. All of these little blocks are what we consider nodes. And simply put, a node is a function or set of functions that have been encapsulated in a certain way that the most complex aspects of it have been obscured from you, and only the parts that you have to interact with are exposed. Now, within our nodes, we have distinct categories. And the first category you can see here are the connectors. The connectors are responsible for talking to the systems with which you would like to integrate. And so all of the complexity around authenticating and talking to these platforms is hidden behind the node. And again, only the most relevant aspects of the node are exposed to you. Triggers are nodes that allow you to determine how a workflow should kick off. So it gives you architectural freedom around when a workflow should run and how it should run. In other words, if you would like a workflow to run twice daily or every 15 minutes, or perhaps on receiving a particular email, triggers will facilitate that process. Processes are the nodes that are responsible for actually supplementing, transforming, and enriching the data sets that you need to work with. So when you receive data from system A and needs to be transformed to a different structure so that system B can ingest it, the processes are there to facilitate that functionality, as well as implement further business rules that you may have necessary for your integration. And then finally, evaluators are the nodes that are going to have a look at the result of a transaction and allow you to kick off additional supporting logic within that workflow. In other words, should a transaction fail, does somebody need to be emailed? Does someone have to be informed in some way? Does a report have to be built? So on and so forth. These four categories encapsulate all the tools that Flowgear provides the integrator, allowing you to build both simple and complex integrations within the scope of a simplified experience. For this demo, we're going to be looking at the movement of stock from a flat file document into the Sage 200 Evolution environment. In this case, the flat file is consisting of comma-separated values. By the end of the demo, you should be comfortable with our branded Evolution connector, as well as one of the ways we can handle the ingestion of flat files on the platform. To kick off the demo, the first thing we're going to want to do is open up a brand new workflow. Once you've navigated to the workflow section over here, you can click on the new button on top here to go ahead and open up the design canvas with which we're going to design the solution on. And we can give this particular workflow an appropriate name and click OK. Now that we've navigated to the Flowgear canvas, the first thing we're going to want to do is show you what that file actually looks like that we'll be dealing with. And so if I drag this across over here, you'll see that we are working with a flat file that is comma separated in its nature and has double quotation marks surrounding each field. So some basic information over here around inventory that we're going to import. Let's get rid of this and start building the solution. The first thing we want to do on the canvas is to get the relevant nodes prepped and ready. And so the first thing we'll then go ahead and do is click on the plus over here to have a look at some of the nodes that we can work with. And in this case, we're going to be looking for a processor node called Flat File. This node is going to be responsible for ingesting that flat file and spitting out an XML document that we can work with further down the line. The next step then is to go ahead and get the Sage Evolution connector up, which is going to be where we send the information to. And then finally, we need something to facilitate the transformation of this data from structure A to B, which is going to be our flagship transformation tool, the Quick Map. So within the scope of these particular nodes we have on the canvas, there really is only one we have to set up a connection for. And so we're going to go ahead and do that by hovering over the connection dropdown, clicking that, and then clicking on the Evolution sandbox. Once we've done that, we can go ahead and open up that connection. This is one that I have filled in previously, but we can go ahead and show you what that looks like. And so here you can see there's a space for all of the credentials you would have to provide for that specific platform or environment. And we can go ahead and test this with the play button over here. We are then greeted with a green test succeeded bar, which tells us that this particular set of credentials is in fact valid and we are authenticating into the platform. So once that step's been done, we can confidently go back to the platform and we can see that our Sage Evolution connector is now connected to the environment we need it to be connected to. So within the scope of this particular solution, what we need to do is provide samples for the Quick Map to actually work with so we can transform the data from structure A to B. On our branded Sage Evolution connector, the way we'll get a sample from there is to go into the options, choose sample, and then we can go through the list of things that we can actually work with in the Sage environment, in which case we're going to work with inventory items. What that's going to do for us is going to open up the request XML. And on the right-hand side, we have the schema for the document that we want to work with. And so we can go ahead and click on some of the basic fields that we're expected to pass along for this particular transaction. And so I'm going to go ahead and select some of these. And we can see that structure start to form on the left-hand side. This will be the basis for the sample document that we will use for the Quick Map. For the time being, we can go ahead and close this off. The next step is to get a sample from the document that we plan to map from. Now, in this case, we want to get that file into the canvas to work with. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and create a variable var. And we're going to go ahead and call this flat file, make it an input, hook it up to the flat file document property of the flat file, click on the actual name, and we're going to change this to a type file, which will be txt. This is one of the ways we can pass data into the Flowgear canvas when we are dealing with files that need to be uploaded. On one of the previous bite-sized videos, we showed you how to do it through the file node itself. If you are interested in getting that data onto the canvas through FTP or an on-prem file location, then you can use the file node and refer to that video. For this one, we're going to go ahead and head to the workflow settings section where we're going to allow this workflow to run on demand. We're going to then hook up the run now to the flat file. And we're going to configure this portion of the flat file to understand what it expects And so in this case, if we bring up the file back again here, we know that the encapsulator is double quotations, and the column delimiter would be a comma. So we're going to go ahead and configure that as such. And we also know that there are column names within that file. So first of all, before we carry on, let's go ahead and save this, head back to the landing page and run this workflow that we've configured so far by uploading the file, selecting the flat file, and then running the workflow. What this has now done for us is, if we go back to the design canvas, we can click on the options window over here, load recent logs, and we will see that on the previous transaction we just ran, we will see that the file was passed along to the flat file, which gives us an XML document that looks like this. So now we actually have some data to work with, and we're going to click on this little button over here, which is going to transform that data onto the canvas, which will give us sample data to work with on both ends. Now that we have sample data from point A to B, we're going to go ahead and hook up our source to the quick map and hook up our result to the request for the Sage Evolution connector. And we can open up our quick map tool over here, which is now going to visually represent those two data structures on the left and on the right. On the left-hand side is the data coming from the flat file, and on the right-hand side is what is expected to be passed along to the Sage Evolution environment. We can begin by mapping some of these things out. So for every row, we're going to want an inventory item. We're going to want to pass along the fact that it is active, an inventory code for the inventory code. And in fact, many of these can be done through the automap feature, so long as the fields are the same name. And here we can see a preview of that payload coming through on the right-hand side, which is starting to shape up to what we expect to see within the structure of the Sage Evolution payload. A few more things we may have to add is some hard-coded values that are expected by Sage Evolution. So in the case of configuration, we can decide whether we want to process all or none if there's a failure, in which case we'll simply make this true. And then finally, we want to grab that XML schema from the sample over here, copy that, and transform it over here onto this. Now we can see the schema being represented on the top here as well. Now that we have a structure that we expect to see, go ahead and close this off, and we can hook all these up, change this to the test profile, because that's the profile for which we provided credentials. We can save this so long. And just before we go ahead and actually process this, let's go and have a look at our Sage 200 Evolution environment to see what currently sits in there. Here you can see our Sage 200 Evo environment, and there are a handful of SKUs here already, inventory 1, 2, and a couple of others over here. Not the ones that we're about to post though. Let's go ahead and close this off and run this integration from end to end. Now we cannot run this integration directly on the canvas because it's expecting a file. So we can do this one of two ways. We can simulate the data over here, where we simply use the data that's come through from the flat file and pass it along hard-coded to the quick map, or we can head back to the canvas over here, run the workflow, pick the file again, and run it from here. That's going to complete in a couple of milliseconds. And now what we can do here is we can navigate to the activity logs on the landing page side of things, click search, and that's going to give us a list of all the transactions that happened for the last 20 transactions. And you can see here within the most recent one, which you ran, there is the flat file data being returned from the flat file node in the shape of this XML document. We then map the inventory items to the quick map into a structure that looks like this. And then finally, we have the response from the Sage environment, which says 3 were processed, 3 were successful, and 3 were valid. Now, these items should exist within our Sage environment. So let's head off back to our Sage environment and see if we can find them. Here we are back in our inventory pane. We can go ahead and do a refresh over here. And we can see some additional items that have come through now, namely the test inventory 3, toy motorbike, and large kite. So here we can see the data has in fact come through in the shape that we expected to pass it along. Let's head back to the design canvas to finish off some of the concepts around this. This particular effort is a simple demonstration of moving data from a flat file in the shape of a CSV through our transformation process and into Sage Evolution in the form of inventory. This process is not production ready, and you will want to add error handling and some other workflow intelligence or business logic, if you will, to achieve the particular integration requirement that you need. All of that functionality is available to you through our additional set of nodes and connectors over here. So anything that you would like to add additional to the logic within this workflow can be found here and added to the canvas and configured. The last few features I'd like to touch on are Enterprise API, revision, and release management. I'd like to show you where you can find those features and what they're all about. So as we start with Enterprise API, it is effectively the ability to turn any workflow into an API-bound endpoint. So to do this, you can head to the workflow settings on the top here. You can then navigate to the section that allows you to apply a binding, as well as a custom domain, which is set inside of your site settings, and then finally a custom path or URL, where this URL is then secured against an API key or a certificate and can be reached by any third-party application or program to pass data into or get data from Flowgear real-time. The next feature I'd like to touch on then is revision management. You can find that feature by clicking on the revision history button over here. And ultimately what this is the ability to see when changes were made, who they were made by, and what those versions of the workflows look like. You can then open those versions of the workflows by clicking on the open button here for any particular version. We'll go to the very first one where we see there was actually nothing at that point. You can then choose to revert to this version if you would like to. And then finally, we have release management, which can be found by clicking on the promote workflow button over here. What this is the ability to merge your environment into UAT in production. So when saves are made or changes are made, we don't, okay, I'm going to redo that part. The last feature I'd like to touch on is release management. You can find that feature by clicking on the promote workflow button over here. And what this brings up is a UI which allows you to merge your test into your UAT and eventually in production. Effectively, what this means is when a save is made, which I will do now, that save is not actually saved against the UAT or production environment until it's explicitly merged into that space. Now, you do not have to use this UI. The purpose of this particular feature is that it's actually backed, in this case, by GitHub, which provides you with a competent platform in which you can then run your change control policy that you've had up until this point. So if we open up this commit over here, we can find that it brings up the GitHub UI, which gives us an idea of what changed from then till now. From here, we can run a pull request or whatever it is that you've been doing up until now, and then obviously merge that into production. And that will then reflect inside of Flowgear here as a production-ready workflow. Now that we've shown you how to build a workflow, if at any point you have to go back and see what happened in that workflow, you can navigate to the workflow logs over here. For more detailed information on the topics we explored today, or if you would like to explore more complex aspects of the platform, including architecture and best practices, please join us for our technical certification course hosted on udemy.com. Also, go ahead and check out some of our other bite-sized videos for more common use cases and platform features. Also, please go ahead and visit our website where you can register for a free trial and complimentary proof of concept, have a look at our unique pricing model, or explore our list of over 200 pre-built connectors. Thank you very much for joining me for this short demo. Have a lovely day further.